Mr. Poe is recognized for his amendment.
Madam Chair, I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will report the amendment.
Which amendment, Mr. Poe? I have 162 and 163.
It's Camp Ashraf.
Camp Ashraf.
Oh, and
As amended.
Poe 163. Add the following. Section 8XX, Statement of Policy regarding Camp Ashraf.
The author is recognized for 5 minutes to explain his amendment. Mr. Poe.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On April the 8th, the Iraqi military invaded Camp Ashraf. Camp Ashraf is a group of Iranian dissidents, about 3,400, that are inside of the country of Iraq, supposed to be protected by Iraq and the rest of the world. 34 Iranians were murdered by the Iraqi government. I've seen the video, as many have, of the unarmed citizens being murdered. When myself, Mr. Duncan, Mr. Carnahan, and Mr. Rohrbacher were in Iraq on June the 11th, we met with the Prime Minister Maliki to discuss this issue. Almost a 2-hour meeting. He gave his side of the story. Toward the end of the meeting, we asked if we could then go to Camp Ashraf and get the other side of the story, the people who were there. He was defiant in making sure that that was not going to happen. He did not give us permission, would not let us go to Camp Ashraf to talk to the survivors of this attack by the Iraqi military. It's obvious to me as a former judge that he didn't want the other side of the story to be told to the Americans that were there. The truth is always the first casualty of an invasion like his military committed in April. Therefore, we were not allowed to talk to the people of Camp Ashraf. This amendment, and I appreciate the chair and the ranking member's input on this amendment, will make sure that the United States takes a firm and strong position in support of the safety of the citizens in Camp Ashraf, the Iranian dissidents, as I call them, many of them freedom fighters that want freedom in their own country of Iran. I believe, this is my opinion, that Maliki and the Iranian government are complicit in cahoots together in trying to remove Camp Ashraf to an unsafe location somewhere else in Iraq, so that at some point the Iraqi government, when they have total control of the area and the United States has left, that these people's lives are in danger. We talk about human rights, we talk about helping people, we talk about making sure that democracy lives throughout the world, and I believe it's important that we practice what we preach, and we should start with Camp Ashraf, making sure that the safety of these people is paramount, that the Iraqi government, the Iranian government does not have their way, and they are relocated somewhere else in Iraq, and their safety becomes in jeopardy.
Would the gentleman yield?
I will yield.
First, I want to thank the gentleman for his amendment, and I wanted to ask the gentleman if he would be willing to answer. In paragraph 2 of the amendment, the reference to international agreements, my assumption this includes the status of forces agreement between, it was entered into by President Bush and the government of Iraq back in 2008. Am I correct in that assumption?
Reclaiming my time, yes, that is just one of the many international agreements that would be covered under this amendment.
I thank the gentleman, and I intend to support the amendment.
Would the gentleman like for us to approve his amendment? So hearing no further requests.
Madam.
Oh, yes, Mr. Ackerman is recognized.
Thank you. Let me congratulate the gentleman from Texas for offering the amendment, which I think is an excellent amendment. I do have one concern, and it's in paragraph 3, and I was wondering if the gentleman would be willing to add the words at the beginning of number 3, to work to prevent the forcible relocation, because otherwise we're committed to an action, affirmatively committed to an action that we may not be at any particular time prepared to engage in.
Mr. Poe?
I do not agree to the phrase work to.
So what you're saying is that it shall be the policy of the United States to prevent, so that we would have to go in, presumably militarily, if an action were taken, we would be aggressively at war?
To answer your question, it would go back to paragraph 2, which says take necessary and appropriate steps.
Could we use that language in paragraph 3 as well instead of the word prevent?
I would accept that amendment.
So
Take all necessary and appropriate
Thank you.
steps
The
to prevent
clerk-
the forcible.
that would be.
If the clerks could note that Mr. Ackerman has proposed an amendment to the Poe amendment that Mr. Poe agrees to. And Mr. Ackerman, would you please state that again so they can write it down?
To amend paragraph 3 to now read, take all necessary and appropriate steps to prevent the forcible, etc.
And Madam Chair, that's acceptable.
With unanimous consent, we will consider the Poe amendment as amended by Mr. Ackerman. Without hearing no further requests for recognition, thank you, Mr. Ackerman. Thank you, Mr. Poe. The question occurs on the Poe amendment as amended. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the amendment is agreed to.
The mullahs in Iran want all U.S. forces out of Iraq, and Prime Minister Maliki is doing their bidding. That was made clear when, under his authority, Iraqi troops invaded Camp Ashraf, a refugee camp for Iranian dissidents, and massacred unarmed residents, leaving 35 dead and hundreds more wounded. The United States has already spent $1 trillion and nearly 4,500 lives, not to mention the tens of thousands who've been wounded, trying to liberate and rebuild Iraq, only to have a government come to power that is in league with the Iran's mullah regime, who is our worst enemy in the region and perhaps in the world. The mullah dictatorship in Tehran is the most dangerous and violent terrorist state in the Middle East, and Maliki is buddy-buddy with them. Well, enough is enough. American troops won the war, but U.S. State Department bureaucrats have lost the peace. Only a new government in Baghdad, one that is grateful for our liberation of the Iraqi people, only then would it be worth for the United States to continue aid and support for Iraq. Maybe it would be a good idea for them not to ally themselves with America's worst enemy and the worst enemy of freedom and security and stability in that region. They are allying themselves with the mullah dictatorship in Iran. There's no reason why we shouldn't ask that they not do that and use our influence. And if they decide that they're going to do it, pull our support for them. Let them know there are consequences if they ally themselves with people who are dedicated to the destruction of Israel and the instability of the region and enemies of the United States. Let me also note, I don't think there's anything wrong with holding people, a government accountable for massacring civilians, massacring unarmed people at a refugee camp, doing the dirty work for the mullah regime. And if there was anything that indicated that these people, that the current government of Iraq are going to be doing the bidding of the Ayatollahs and the mullah regime, was this massacre that happened of unarmed people at Camp Ashraf. And the current trend among the leadership of Iraq today is to head towards making an alliance with our enemies, the mullahs, in Iran.